Our story begins with an old king writing a book, telling us about his life. And what a life it is. Who would think a king would have time for something as normal as that? But hey, if you're a king, you've got to leave your legacy somehow, right? To kick off the movie with a bang, we see a poor woman, all bloodied, running from a beast. Could it get any worse? She tries to climb a mountain, but let's be realistic, folks. The animal has the advantage and attacks mercilessly. If you're eating something, put it down now because the beast kills her and drags her away. Not exactly the Friday night fun you'd expect. Back in the village, people are chasing a girl and her father, and they're not exactly autograph seekers. No, they're ready to kill the girl. But surprise, two warriors show up and kick the villagers' butts, saving the girl and her father. Our hero is a warrior named Frank. Extra point to Frank for having such a common name in such an unusual movie. After that, Frank and his companion head to the king's palace. And the king, well, he's actually a prince, but he doesn't know it yet. So these two meet with the king, who turns out to be the prince's father. The king gives them a mission, because it wouldn't be a good movie without one. There's a crazy wolf causing havoc throughout the kingdom, killing people every day. Can you believe it? That's scary, folks. So the king offers a reward to our brave warriors to get rid of the threat. Frank and his buddy are thrilled by the idea because now they've got free room and board and a bit of adventure. The prince, of course, wants to join them. Who wouldn't want some action? The next day they head into the jungle, and what they find there, well, let me tell you, it's not for the faint of heart. They come across a dead woman, completely mangled by the wolf. A pretty intense start, right? After the grim crime scene, our heroes head back to the palace, but find no clue about where that evil wolf has gone. But hey, it's not all doom and gloom because our good friend Frank meets Sophie, and boy, is Sophie a stunner, folks. Frank takes a liking to her right away, and it seems the feeling is mutual. We've got romance in the air. While Frank is studying the map of the area, his warrior sidekick gets into a mess with the villagers, and to add a bit of drama, the fight spills over to Sophie. But don't worry, our guy is a natural fighter and can take them all. Not one of those villagers can stand up to him. He's a real fighting machine, tossing villagers around like rag dolls. The king, of course, has to step in and fires his gun to calm things down. But surprise, the girl and her father they saved earlier reappear, and the girl, whom the villagers had called a witch, is sick. Really sick. She's throwing up, and the villagers are terrified, so they start calling her a witch again. But our smart Frank, who's a mix of warrior and doctor, examines her and tells everyone she's not a witch, she's just sick. So they all need to stop bothering her and leave her alone. The next day, the wolf hunt is on. All the king's men, along with their ladies, are out shooting and killing wolves left and right. Meanwhile, Frank, his buddy, and Sophie move away from the killing and come across a white wolf. Just when Sophie is about to shoot it, Frank stops her and asks her not to kill the wolf. According to Frank, the wolf came to save his life and doesn't deserve to be killed. The king's soldiers have no hesitation, and they keep taking out wolves left and right, hoping to get the killer wolf among them. Meanwhile, the frightened villagers gather in a church, seeking divine protection. A priest tells them they need to pray to save themselves from the wolf. There's no other way. Sure thing. Then a desperate man enters the scene, claiming his son has been attacked by the wolf and is unconscious. In response, the villagers set out to capture the wolf, believing it must be nearby. Our hero Frank heads into the jungle and finds another mutilated body. But it's not just any discovery, folks. In the corpse, he finds a small piece of iron. What could this mean? Frank keeps it to investigate. Frank's warrior companion rescues the injured boy and brings him out of the cave, hoping he can identify the wolf. But the real twist comes when Frank arrives and tells the king he found a piece of iron on one of the bodies, hinting that the culprit is not just any wolf, but some other animal that looks like one. You can imagine the surprise, right? But hey, no one believes him. Everyone is confused. If it's not a wolf, then what the heck is it? And where did it come from? Things get rough for our protagonist. The king removes Frank from the case and hires a hunter from another kingdom. As you can imagine, Frank is not happy about the news and gets angry. But then, the injured boy wakes up and confirms Frank's theory. He says the attacker wasn't a wolf, but a strange animal with a dark, odd skin he'd never seen before. Turns out the wild animal wasn't acting alone. No, sir. According to the boy, a person was controlling it, and the animal obeyed every one of his sinister commands. Now imagine the look on people's faces when they hear this. They think the boy is scared and delusional because who could control such a dangerous animal? Please, if you're enjoying this video, show your support with a precious like. It only takes a second and helps me a lot. A few days later, the hunter hired by the king calls Frank with news. He says he's caught a wolf and asks Frank to make a replica of the fearsome animal's body. His plan is to kill the wolf, present it as the real killer, and become the hero. If Frank helps, the hunter will give him a nice sum of money. Our Frank, in need of some cash, agrees. He modifies the wolf's body to make it look like the killer animal, and the hunter shows it to everyone, claiming it's the beast that has been terrorizing them. And of course, the villagers are happy that they've finally gotten rid of the monster. But in the jungle, the real beast is still causing trouble. It attacks and kills a woman who was searching for a baby goat and drags her into the water. Back at the palace, Sophie receives a desperate visit. The girl whose portrait Frank painted confesses that Frank only used her as a model and that he has always loved Sophie. Quite the bombshell. Sophie feels bad for doubting Frank. Just as Frank and his buddy are about to leave the kingdom, the prince intercepts them. He tells them he knows the real killer animal is still alive and killing, so they need to stay and finish the job. And here's the detail. Sophie also wants them to stay. To convince Frank, the prince gives him a letter from Sophie. And boy, does it work. Frank, happy to hear from Sophie, decides to stay. Frank went to see his girl Sophie in the middle of the night, like Romeo and Juliet, all tender and romantic. They hugged and all that, but bam. Just when his boss left to grab some beers to celebrate the reunion, the movie monster shows up. This animal was there, and more than a hungry hyena, it launched an attack and took out Sophie's father. Then it tried to go after the rest, showing off its strange skin. Don't think it was just a little critter. It was a kind of killing machine covered in a skin that made it more menacing than a crocodile in the Nile, and it wasn't even a dangerous animal, just some kind of suit someone put on. But looking like that, it became unstoppable. It got close to attacking Sophie, but the guy controlling it decided to change direction and led it towards the town. The next day, Frank, his colleague, and the prince had to come up with a superhero-level plan to catch the creature and whoever was controlling it. After a while, Frank's buddy spotted the creature, took a shot at it, and trapped it. But the creature was like the Hulk. It broke free and took off. In its escape, it ran into the prince and left him badly injured. Even though Frank and his friend kept shooting at it, it fell into the trap again. But guess what? It broke out once more with its strength. While Frank took care of the wounded prince, his friend went after the creature, trying to catch it. He reached a cave and found the father of a village girl. He tried to hide the man somewhere safe, but soon everyone surrounded him and attacked him like a scene out of a Tarantino movie. The guy, who was a brave warrior, withstood the attacks like a champ and fought back. Every leap was a knockout, a real spectacle. But in all that chaos, he ran into the village girl, who had been accused of witchcraft, and he wondered if she was involved in all this. Just in those few moments of hesitation, bam! He was shot from behind. After that, everyone piled on top of him, beating him worse than a rag doll, leaving him unconscious and tossing him into the cave. There, he encountered a white wolf Frank had saved earlier, which quickly ran off to find Frank to help his friend. Seeing his buddy beaten to a pulp, Frank couldn't help but cry. Furious, Frank decided to avenge his friend. There was no turning back. His friend was dead, and Frank chose to take justice into his own hands. He found a place where people were partying, but Frank wasn't in the mood for celebrations. He started throwing punches like there was no tomorrow. He became a fighting machine, an unstoppable force. Throwing, punching, breaking, choking. Nothing could stop him. He was a whirlwind of rage. After all the chaos, he returned to his friend and gave him a proper funeral, burning his body and saying goodbye as he deserved. But here's the twist. The king and his entourage went after him, accusing him of slaughtering the entire village. Even though Frank tried to explain that he was just avenging his friend, that they were the ones who killed first, nobody listened. And just like that, they captured him and locked him up. Then a girl showed up and dropped a bombshell. She said the priest had sent her and that she worked for a spy movie-like organization, the Brotherhood. Apparently they and some accomplices were the ones who created the killer. And the craziest part? Some members of the king's entourage were in on it. The plan was to kill the king, take over the kingdom, and seize power. But Frank knew everything, and that made him dangerous. So the priest decided he had to be eliminated, and the girl was supposed to poison Frank's food. Frank began to suffer, writhing in pain until he eventually died. When Sophie found out, she couldn't believe it. She had to see him, but upon seeing Frank's body, she broke down. However, the girl from the portrait and a few allies went to Frank's tomb. Turns out, the girl hadn't fully poisoned him, just enough to leave him unconscious, to fool the priest into believing Frank was dead. Meanwhile, Sophie was in pieces, her heart shattered. Her fiancé showed up then. The guy played the good guy, but he was really taking advantage of the situation. And here comes the shocker. The guy was just like the man who controlled the monster, long nails and all. Eventually, it was revealed that he was part of the Brotherhood and had teamed up with the priest to scare people, kill the king, and seize control of the kingdom. He confessed everything to Sophie, and right after that, killed her. Frank found out and was beyond furious. He decided to go after every member of the Brotherhood, taking them out one by one with his combat skills. Then he went after Sophie's fiancé, and they had an intense sword fight. But Frank was stronger, controlled the fight, and ended up beating him to death as revenge for what he did to Sophie. Meanwhile, the priest fled to the jungle, but the wolves found him there and tore him apart. And for added drama, the prince told Frank that Sophie was dying and that he needed to say goodbye because they were in love. Frank made it to where Sophie lay unconscious and gave her some medicine his friend had, but Sophie didn't react. So Frank stayed by her side, begging her to recover, and eventually, she woke up. Afterward, Frank went to see the injured creature and decided to end its suffering. He shot it. With the Brotherhood and their monster gone, Frank saved the kingdom. He decided to leave with Sophie on a boat. They scattered his friend's ashes at sea and promised to get married and be happy once they reached their kingdom. But the adventure doesn't end here. I'll see you in the next recap video. Let's go.